Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. It's Tori, and today we are going to be doing my February 2026 wrap-up. So let's start with the one book that I DNF'd this month, and that was Thousand Cranes by Yasunari Kawabata. Now, this one made me a little sad because I've been looking forward to it. It was on my priority reads for 2025, and I didn't end up getting to it, but we got to it in February, and honestly, I DNF'd this pretty early on. So this book takes place in ancient China, and there's a woman in the household that we're introduced to right away in the story who is being talked about, and apparently she has this really noticeable birthmark over part of her chest, and the family is literally just sitting there talking about how ugly it is, how, you know, maybe we could marry her off before her husband sees it. If she has a child, that's going to be the first thing the child sees in their life, and that's going to be bad luck. And they literally were talking about this woman's chest birthmark for like 4 pages. And I just, like, I'm sure that there are some great explorations of beauty standards and superstition and all of those things in this book, but it was just not something I was interested in reading, and I gave it a good try for a few pages, but when they were continually just not doing anything else at the beginning of the book, I just felt like, you know what, I'm going to admit to myself that this is not something I'm interested in reading right now, which is okay because we are embracing the DNF this year. I am going to be much more stringent about that in 2026 because I want to get to books that are making me really excited. So that was a DNF for February. However, getting to the books that I did actually read and finish, I had some chonkers this month, you guys. And the first one was this giant doorstop of a novel called Ghosts of Rheynia by Tim Fasciola. This is a 600-page prequel to Tim's main series, which begins with the book A Vengeful Realm. And this one features a world on this massive, I think, island that is very necromantic, it is dark, it is very horror-centric, and the world is basically dead or dying. There are a few pockets of humanity left living under constant terror of death or worse, and the world is kind of ruled by an elusive skeleton king. There are hordes of zombies, there are shades, there are factions who are scrabbling over whatever little power is left to humankind in this world. And at the heart of it, there are 2 sisters who are on opposite sides of the human conflict, both trying to survive the world they're in and also struggling with a lot of family history and generational trauma and all of that sort of thing. It was so cool to see what Tim had done with a world that felt like a necromancer. I don't know how to describe that in any other way. There's death magic, there's blood magic, there's combat galore through this entire 600 pages, and the world building was hands down my favorite part. There are a lot of family dynamics that are slowly revealed throughout the story. There's a lot of past history that feels very present, and that was another thing that I thought Tim did really well with this, that you get a sense with the characters right away that they've been through a lot, and you feel that history as we're moving into this book at this present moment. So I really appreciated that about it a lot, and the push and pull between the 2 sisters, you guys know I love a sister bond, was really interesting. The one thing that I had a hard time with this one is that there were quite a few moments of plot convenience where I felt like the characters were just sort of being rushed along and not really ever given a moment for us to experience the quiet between all of the action that was packed into this, because this is literally a pretty much solid action ride from page 1 to page 600, and there's very little in the way of characters at rest, which does reflect the survival aspect of the world and the story. But for a book this long, I definitely needed more of a breath at some point, because after a while I found myself feeling really burned out by the constant headlong rush of action. And I love combat. I love military fantasy. So it's not the subgenre of fantasy at all, but that definitely kind of pulled, I don't know if I'd say pulled down my investment or engagement with the characters to some degree after a while, just because it started to just feel exhausting. You know, that does reflect on the world that's been created here for sure. There were a few relationships that I felt like were pretty rushed and kind of came out of nowhere for plot purposes. It's also, this is such a brutal book, you guys. This is so brutal. There are, like, this is one of those books where you cannot get attached to anyone. You are not safe. You're just not safe. Around every corner is more terror and brutality, and you know, you never know what's coming next in this book. So I will probably try the first book in this series later on, because I think it takes place in a different part of the world, and this is kind of a setup to one of the main cast in that upcoming series. So Ghosts of Rheynia by Tim Fasciola was my first read of February. All right, guys, next up we have Shards of Earth by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the book that more people have tried to get me to read for the last 2 years than I think any other book on my TBR. So many people were desperate for me to read this. This is book one of Adrian Tchaikovsky's sci-fi space opera called The Final Architecture. This is a story of humanity living in perpetual fear of what might be coming around the bend. The antagonistic force in this story are the architects, and they are some kind of massive planet-sized, like giant Death Star spaceship-sized alien creature slash force that appears near a inhabited world and recreates it into some kind of architectural wonder, but in the process kills everyone that is still alive on the planet. So kind of a problem. One of our main POVs and the kind of backbone of our story is Idris, who is one of the intermediaries who is able to connect magically, scientific magic kind of system, with the mind of the architect. That was why they were created. They are taken from random people who are then trained. Many of them die and honed into these mental war machines, basically. Idris, after his bout with the last architect that was seen, is now trying to outrun his past by being part of a small motley crew that gives very strong Firefly vibes. They're basically a smuggling transport sort of ship, and that's where we get our motley crew cast. Because Idris has become part of this small family on this spaceship, and unfortunately, this little motley crew gets wrapped up in some events that they did not ask to be part of, and sets off a chain of events. And of course, Idris, being this famous intermediary, does not help them because he's like a beacon for people that want to use the power that he has. So I really loved the concept of this book. It's very rare that a book hooks me by the concept first. Usually it's a character. In this book, it was completely the opposite, which kind of surprised me because I went into this knowing that everybody was super excited for me to meet this motley crew. And I do really like this motley crew a lot. A second character that we meet early on in the book is called Solace, and she is basically a human Valkyrie. She is a battle angel, essentially, and what a phenomenal character. She is hands down one of my favorite female characters I've read in SFF for a long time. She's fantastic. And she gets roped into the goings-on during the story. One of the things I want to mention about this, and this is something I love, is when authors take massive emotional risks that pay off very early on in the stories. And Adrian Tchaikovsky knows exactly how to get you invested so much, emotionally immersed in what's happening with these characters, and then pivot or twist the plot or do something crazy. And some authors would do that and it would feel unearned. It would feel frustrating. It would feel like you're kind of being cheated in a way. Tchaikovsky never feels that way. And I need to know how he does that because it's kind of incredible. But really, really enjoyed Shards of Earth. This is a fantastic sci-fi for me to add to my repertoire because I've been loving digging into sci-fi more this last couple of years, and this one definitely did not disappoint. I think the reason why this wasn't a full 5 stars for me was because I really liked the characters a lot. I was very invested. I had a hard time putting the book down, but I wasn't as immersed in the motley crew as I was expecting to be, and I think that was my biggest, not complaint, but the thing that held this back from being a 5-star read for me. I do have book 2 on my nightstand right now, and I started it a couple nights ago. Very excited to continue. I love several of the characters in this story already, and I am excited to just enjoy the rest of the trilogy more and more and see where Adrian Tchaikovsky's crazy imaginative mind is going to take us. Another thing I'm going to mention really quick before I put this down is this is another author who can write aliens that feel like aliens. Oh my goodness, so good. I am so impressed when an author can write a alien species that feels so foreign and inhuman that you believe it hook, line, and sinker that this is an alien race that absolutely could exist. This is what they would be like, and they are absolutely not human. That is so impressive, and Adrian Tchaikovsky is fantastic at it. Next, we made some progress on The Death Cycle by Terry Pratchett. This is book 4 out of 5 in the Death Cycle within Terry Pratchett's larger Discworld series saga, and that is The Hogfather, which is one of the favorite Discworld novels that always gets mentioned when people are talking about books they love by this author. And oh my goodness. So I didn't read this during Christmas like my husband did, but it was still in winter, so I felt like that mostly counted. Basically what happens is there's an attempt on the life of the Hogfather, who is the Discworld's Santa Claus stand-in, and he disappears, or even potentially dies. And Death has to step into the sleigh, put on a fake beard, giddy up the pigs that pull the sleigh, and go fill in. That part of this book is absolutely delightful. Anything that Terry Pratchett writes with death in the center of the perspective is so good. It is so good, and the way that Death is this terrifying, imposing figure and manages to be super awkward, trying to figure out all of these human traditions and human emotions during this process is just an absolute delight. We also come back to Death's granddaughter, Susan Stowe Hellett, who is one of my favorite Discworld characters now through this series. I love her so much. She is a governess overseeing 2 small children, and she's amazing. You guys, I love her character so much. There were so many moments with Susan that I laughed out loud especially in the beginning of this book. But also what surprised me about this one is that it is one of the darker Terry Pratchett books that I have read. There is basically an assassination plot going on in the background, and the assassin in question is quite terrifying. I would say he's one of the scariest Terry Pratchett characters that I've read. Really creepy. Also set in the same world as Christmas traditions trying to be upheld by death. You know, it's very Discworld. It's very absurd. It's very silly. It's also very intentional and emotional and deep and layered, which I love. I have the same complaint with this book that I had with the last couple Death books, and I am just kind of accepting at this point that that is the common denominator amongst the Death books in general. And that is that while these are called the Death Cycle or the Death series, Death is about 20% of these books. And you know, you get a little bit of Susan on top of that, maybe another 20% is Susan, and then the rest of the story, we are stuck in the perspectives of a group of haphazard wizards at the Unseen University who are trying to fiddle with magic and trying to figure out what's going on in the world, why everything's falling apart, and how they can fix it. And this might as well have been called the Wizards series part 2, because there is a Wizards series in Discworld, and I wish they would just stay in their lane, honestly. Like, there's too much wizard in this death book. There's too much. There's too much. There are some funny moments with the wizards, don't get me wrong, but that's not why I'm reading a death book. I'm reading a death book for Death and for Susan, who is Death's granddaughter, and the time I spend with them, I love. And then we keep spending more time with the wizards than the characters that I actually want to be around. So, again, same complaint that I've had with the last couple death books, and that has gotten so frustrating because I want more of the characters that this series is supposedly about. But you know what? Terry Pratchett, it's his book, so he can go off on a tangent if he wants to. I just would like more death, please. And more Susan Stowe-Hellett, please, and less wizards, please, thank you. Enjoyed the Hogfather. There were a lot of parts of this that I thought were really incredibly well written. There's a City Watch character that makes an appearance in this book that ripped my heart out and stomped all over it, and then taped it back together nicely and handed it back. That is my official opinion on the Hogfather. I enjoyed it. It is not on my favorite Discworld novels list, and I'm still at a point where the death cycle is not reaching the highs that City Watch did for me. I wasn't really expecting it to, but still a lot of great moments. After the Hogfather, I dipped into Sea of Souls, which was one of my priority reads for here in 2026, and this is by N.C. Scrimgeour. This is a book 1 in a trilogy, and I cannot remember the name of the trilogy itself, but this is heavily steeped in Irish mythology and folklore. We have Selkies, or Selkays, as apparently they're pronounced. I did not know that until I read this book, so I've been pronouncing Selkays incorrectly my entire life. And we follow a young woman who is off on a ship fighting monsters for the governing body of this world. And she's the navigator on this ship, and she gets a message from her mother saying, "You need to come home right now. I have a secret that I need to tell you." Isla, who is our main character, is rejoining her family after 7 years away at sea, and she is chasing this elusive secret that her mother told her about in this letter. And I can't say a whole lot more than that without spoiling some events at the beginning of the book. But this one, the mythology is so vibrant. It is so present through the pages of this book. It's like literally coming off the page. That was my favorite part of it. I thought that the Selke culture that was being represented here was really interesting, and I thought it was very different than a lot of fantasy that I have read in the past. And I do love some naval fantasy, so the parts at the beginning where she's still at sea were really cool. The characters never really hooked me completely in this. I think Isla is a really interesting character, and there were some parts of this where I do feel like the story that was being told was a victim of its subgenre tropes. For example, there is a romantic subplot in this, which, you guys, I'm so ready to read some books where I can literally come on here and be like, this romance was amazing, because I'm pretty sure all of you would fall out of your chairs or wherever it is you're sitting, because I know that they are out there, and there are so many books where I do love the romance. There were some moments that I felt like completely ignored Isla's experience as a seafaring navigator for 7 years and her level of expertise compared to the people around her. The romance in this just, it felt a little forced, I'm not gonna lie. It didn't feel natural. It felt very immediate and rushed, and I didn't love that. I didn't feel like There's also a nickname that the romantic interest calls Isla throughout this entire book that, again, felt very forced and cringy. So yeah, this one I feel like is a book that follows a lot of tropes that are very popular while telling its own story. And that is something that I will say I appreciate about it a lot. This is not a book where I would fall into the quote unquote target audience. I hate that term, but you guys know what I mean. But I think for the people that read books that they want those kind of tropes, those popular tropes, but they want a book that maybe is going to feel a little bit different. It's going to introduce a different kind of world and add that mythology to it. This is an excellent choice, I think. It's also written very well. I feel like N.C. Scrimgeour has a bingeably readable writing style. So yeah, I would highly recommend this for readers who enjoy those popular romance tropes where you don't want spice in your novel, you want a world that is interesting, different, it's going to introduce something unique to your fantasy reading. 100% would recommend this book. Next up, I did a buddy read with my friends Joanna, John from Talking Story, and Anitha Gade. And this is a book I've been really excited to read for a long time. And I am not going to wax eloquent about all of my opinions on this book because we haven't had our discussion on it yet, but I'm excited to tell you about it anyways. Black Sun Rising, the first book in the Coldfire trilogy by C.S. Friedman. This is a sci-fantasy. And it takes place on a world called Rheynia, which is as much a character as any of the living beings that walk on it. And we follow several characters. I don't even know how to start talking about this book, you guys. I love this book. I'm just going to say it. I loved this book. I am so excited to continue this trilogy. Was this a perfect book? No. Were there still some things that I disliked about it? Moments that I was like, meh? Definitely. However, as an overall experience, absolutely loved this book. We do have a bit of a motley crew that gathers during this book, and the way that I would describe the dynamic of character, which I think is one of the strongest suits of this novel, I'll get to the other ones momentarily, it's like if a warrior priest and a wounded scholar, mentally wounded scholar / lore master, and small company had to travel with a character that's basically the equivalent of Dracula. Because they have a common cause, common purpose. And the moral struggle that would cause, and the layers of that kind of character dynamic, group dynamic, so good. It's so interesting. I could not put this book down. And this book is only 400 and some pages. It feels like a much longer book, almost 500 pages. It feels like a much longer book because it is a classic. It is very slow burn. This is, if you can't handle characters traveling for a really long time, this might be a tough book for you. I loved what we were exploring through the character relationships in that traveling middle, so that didn't bother me as much. The other thing that I will say about C.S. Friedman's work that I think is brilliant is her use of world and environment. There are very few authors that truly use the environment of their novel to its full potential. This is a book that I think is a premium example of an author who does that well. Every location that these characters find themselves in matters. The ground around the characters matters, and she uses that environment so well to make the scene more vibrant, to make the scene engaging with all of our senses. She's so good at that. And I found myself at the end of this book really struggling with so many of the same moral questions as our characters were about this character that is the kind of Dracula equivalent. And for those of us who like a true anti-hero and the depth of thought that those characters require, this is a book that has a true anti-hero in it. A character who is like on the very fingertip edge of morality. And is there redemption? Is there a way for a character like this to do the right thing ever? Is it all in their self-interest? Like, there's so many questions coming up in this novel that I just was so interested by, and it was all pretty subtle, in my opinion. I think she wove it into the story really well, so I never felt like I was being told what to think. There are a couple of things in this book that I felt like were very unnecessary in terms of content, that I do feel like this is a product of its time in those moments. But overall, I just had a great time with this book. I cannot wait to continue with the second and third book in this trilogy. I highly recommend this book. This was a 5-star read for me, even with the nitpicky things that I had about it. Overall, I loved this book more and more and more as I read it. The beginning was slow, and I will admit that for anybody that had a hard time in the beginning or has had a hard time with reading this book, the beginning did take me a little bit to get hooked, for sure. Once I was bought in to the character journey and the exploration of theme that Friedman was presenting, I was all in, and I couldn't stop, and I couldn't put it down. And I read like 150 pages of this book in a day at one point, and for the level of book this is, that surprised me. Like, I could not put it down. I absolutely could not put it down. So, Black Sun Rising, big success. Really excited that I picked up this trilogy this year and that I am going to be reading the next book very soon. Then I did something that I knew I shouldn't have done. I knew I shouldn't have done it when I did it. I knew it. And then I knew that I'd have to talk to you guys about it. And then I was even more like, why did I do this? As you guys know, I read the first 2 books of Dungeon Crawler Carl on audio, listened on audio, and while I love the narration of Jeff Hayes, he's absolutely brilliant, the books, in terms of content, I feel like there's so much about them that buries the good stuff. And on my Audible account, on my audiobook account, I had like 4 hours, less than 4 hours left of Dungeon Crawler Carl 3, which I DNF'd over a year ago. And for a tragic moment, the completionist in my brain won. And I was like, you know what? I'm going for walks more this week. I need something to listen to. I should finish this. I'll just finish it, because then it's done. So I dragged myself through the last 3.5 hours or so of the Dungeon Anarchist's Cookbook, which is book 3 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl. And you guys, there's a fantastic character arc in this story. Katya, if you know, you know. There are some amazing moments. There are some really funny moments in this book. And I'm not going to belabor this review because you guys have heard me say all this before. But once again, everything I love about Dungeon Crawler Carl and everything that makes me want to continue is just absolutely buried under crude and gross sexual humor. And on top of that, this third book, the world building in this was a mess. You guys, this book is a mess. Like, plot-wise and world building-wise, it is a mess. It was really ambitious. It is so confusing, and it is exhausting to even try to figure out where things are, what's going on, and how things work. I just quit after a while, which is, even for people that love this series, I have been told that's most people's experience. The crazy train stations and how convoluted and messy they are, it's not fun to read. It's not fun to read, and it's very confusing, and it's very info dumpy. I was like, I don't remember the first 2 books getting me this frustrated with info dumping. So I'm in that weird, frustrated point where I do want to know what happens at the end to these characters, but I'm not willing to drag myself through an entire series to get there with the kind of content that I don't think lessens over the course of the series. I don't know. But yeah, I was very frustrated by the end of this. But hey, I finished it, so yay. So anyways, we're gonna leave Dungeon Crawler Carl where it lies now, and I'm just going to admit finally, I think that this series, as much as I want to know what happens, it's gonna make me too frustrated. So this is a series that I am officially going to put down. The Inner Completionist can just take a hike. I finished February with The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. I picked this up kind of on a whim, and you'll see a video out later this month that kind of explains the origin of me picking this book up. But this one's been sitting on my shelves for probably 2.5, 3.5 years, somewhere in there. And I always passed over it because I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. I love the cover. The synopsis sounds really interesting, but I just never picked it up because I wasn't sure. And at the end of February, I did. I was so pleasantly surprised by this, you guys. And again, is it a perfect book? No. Did I enjoy the heck out of my time in this? Yes. Did I read it in 2.5 days? Yes. I couldn't put this down either. So this is the story. It's kind of a pseudo-medieval European world, and we have Conrad von Walt, who is a imperial justice. He is a traveling judge who goes around the different places in the kingdom, listens to people's grievances, doles out justice, makes sure that the law is being followed, that sort of thing. And he is the type of character who follows the letter of the law, right? He is very, very stringent on the law, and nobody's above it, and that's how he conducts himself. This story is actually told through the lens of his 19-year-old female clerk, Helena, who he found as a gutter waif who tried to steal from him. And instead of, throwing her to the wolves, he decided to make something of her and tried to give her a better life. And through this book, there's the larger conflict that starts building in the world itself. And it really kind of represents a difference in philosophy. There's these two philosophies warring back and forth against each other that builds throughout the story. The justices, like Conrad in this world, seem to hold the majority, if not all, of the magic that exists in it. And some people don't love that. So Helena, as a first-person narrator for this story, I actually didn't hate. As a character, she did frustrate me a lot, I won't lie. And I know a lot of people who have struggled with this book really do not like her as a character and narrator, because she's a 19-year-old girl, and everything that comes with that, the lack of experience, the kind of more emotional focus on the things that are going on with her. There's a very small romantic subplot in this book that kind of comes out of nowhere, of course. And some of that did really frustrate me, but also I found seeing Conrad and the imperial justice system through her eyes was really interesting. And I didn't hate it. She frustrated me a lot, but there were so many moments where she still felt like a 19-year-old girl to me in a lot of ways, who, has been in sort of sheltered because all she's done for her life as an adult is traveled around with Conrad. So she has a very specific view of the world and her place in it. But this is essentially, there's some horror in here. This is essentially an epic fantasy mixed with a courtroom drama. And it's very focused on the justice system of this world, which I love, because I love when fantasy authors take a unique look at a specific part of a fantasy world and dig into it and really show us the ins and outs of the characters who are within that section of the world. Overall, I couldn't put this down. I really enjoyed it. It surprised me, honestly, how much I enjoyed it. I wasn't anticipating enjoying it as much as I did. And I loved it so much that the minute I finished, I went and bought book 2, which is now on its way to me, and not fast enough, might I add. So, yeah, honestly, 2 series this month that I am so excited to continue. This one was a complete dark horse that I was not anticipating at all. And now I have another unfinished series that I must read in the near future because I want to know what happens. This one's a recommend from me. Very excited to read book 2. By the time I'm filming this, I've actually also read the prequel novella, which you'll have to wait to hear my opinions on until March's wrap up. It was really nice to finish that because it's been on my TBR for ages, and I'm so glad that I finally actually read it. So this, yikes, was my stack of reads from February. And considering how short February is compared to all the other months, I mean, it's only a couple of days, it's not that much, but it's shorter than the other months. I feel so good about how much reading I got done in February, and I crossed a lot of priority reads off of my list. I read some indie, I read some sci-fi, I read some fantasy. I found 2 5-star reads, which I was not expecting. It was a good month. I would love to know down in the comments, I'm going to drop this stack of books. I would love to know down in the comments if you've read any of these books. Please let me know your experience with them and what you think, or if you have any of these on your TBR, I'd love to hear about it. My book of the month. Honestly, this was a easy choice for me. I had 2 5-star reads this month, and so it was really between those two, and that was, of course, The Justice of Kings and Black Sun Rising by C.S. Friedman. I really enjoyed both of these. I binged both of these. However, Black Sun Rising is going to be my book of the month for February 2026, and you guys, I can't wait to continue this series. It's so good. It's so good. And I can't wait to have my discussion with Joanna and John and Anitha once everyone finishes reading it later this month, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, super excited about it. Definitely add this to your TBR if that sounds like something you would enjoy. And I hope you guys also had a fantastic reading month in February. I hope you're having a great week finding some new 5-star reads, and I will see you all in the next video.